Hello, everyone, and welcome to our year-round screening series, now virtual, of Film Independent Presents. First off, I'd like to thank some of our amazing supporters. We have our lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which has supported Film Independent Presents for many, many years, and without whom we would not be able to do this, especially during this pandemic. Also, our screening partner, Vision Media, and our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. Today, we are very excited to have a guest moderator, the fabulous Jenelle Riley from Variety, whom we love and adore. And I will let her take it from here. Thanks so much, Jenelle.
Hi, as Brian told you, my name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm so thrilled to be here today for this Q&A with Dick Johnson is Dead. This is a beautiful movie that premiered at this year's Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Special Jury Award for Innovation in Nonfiction Storytelling. And it is now available on Netflix for everyone to see. So please join me in welcoming its director, co-writer, and in some ways its star, Kirsten Johnson. Hi.
Hi, Jenelle. It's so thrilling to be here with you. And this is the way in which my dad can be present with us in this conversation. So he's with us too.
Well, I think probably everyone who has seen the film, the first thing we want to know is, how is your dad?
So, I talk to my dad every day that I can. He is right now in a dementia care facility, a memory care facility outside of DC. During the pandemic, he stayed with my brother from March until July, which is just a truly transformative thing for our entire family. He is both really wants to come home, totally understands that because of the pandemic, he needs to be isolated from our big crazy family. And 3 is not totally getting, his dementia is advanced, so he's not totally getting what's happening with the film and how much love there is for it. But then sometimes he is. I went to visit him on his birthday and he was reading the New York Times, the Manohla Dargis review, and he was like, I didn't know that the New York Times was covering birthdays now. So, how all of us wish to have a New York Times obituary. My dad thought he got a half-page article for his birthday. So, he's still living the dream the dream of love and enjoying life that he always lives.
And in a way, he's not wrong. So,
True.
Actually, before we get to the film, I'm curious because I heard that you sort of came to filmmaking later in life when you were at college. Before that, you weren't really what we might call a film and TV nerd.
Well, that's because I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. And, I think Seventh-day Adventism is a sort of quintessential American religion. It emerged at the end of the 19th century, and it was sort of right with the birth of photography and the kind of penny and nickel, sort of vaudeville shows. And basically right away, they were like, our vision of heaven, our story is the story. All this other entertainment is questionable. And so Adventists early on really were against watching movies. And both of my parents didn't watch movies when they were young. My mother didn't read any fiction books, right? The Bible was her book, but she was a wildly sophisticated woman at the same time. My dad was a little bit more interested in what cinema had to offer. So, sort of on the sly, he was bringing things in, and he snuck me into a couple of movies early on and, changed my life.
Was there a moment when you sort of realized that this is what you wanted to do?
No, I would say it's moments. It's an accumulation of moments. And I love that actually, when people ask me where did this film come from? I can tie back so many different threads. I could tell you sort of 15 different stories of where this film came from. So I would say that my love of movies has this, it's connected to many things. But it was a gradual awakening. And in many ways, my career as a cinematographer has kept revealing things to me about what cinema means to me. But I would say it is my religion.
I know you worked on films like Citizen4 and The Oath before you made, was it your directorial debut, Camera Person?
It was not, I actually made a film about racial discrimination in the justice system. In the late 90s, I made a film about the death penalty in 2001 that I co-directed with Katie Chevigny. And I've made several short films, but Camera Person really that I made in 2016 was sort of like, I was like, oh, this is the voice. Like, I fully own Camera Person. So many people mistake it for my debut film. But I think that's like one of those interesting things about our place in history and what people remember about us when they remember it, what they think is possible. So there's a version of us out there in the public space, and then there's our private stories we tell to each other about our creative careers.
And in that film, it's again very personal. And I don't just mean all films are personal, but it's largely about your life. And were you comfortable at the time, like sort of putting yourself on camera and putting yourself out there?
Well, I mean, Camera Person is a really weird film. It's a film made of footage that I shot for other people on their documentaries, so like including Laura Poitras or Michael Moore. I had shot as a cinematographer, and at a certain point, I really wanted to reflect upon this work that we do. And I always imagined I would need to make a film full of voiceover, sort of explaining what I was experiencing. But as we struggled with it in the edit room, we sort of came upon this idea, can the footage speak for itself? And in fact, it really could. And the footage revealed me behind the camera without me ever being in front of the camera. So one of the many things I learned from Camera Person was you can reveal very intimate, very private things in a movie, and you still belong to yourself. And so like my dad and me, like we still got our thing, even though Dick Johnson is dead, is out in the world and around the world with Netflix. But I just realized, life is so complex that actually, even if you try your hardest to open yourself completely up, there's still plenty that you get to keep for yourself.
And obviously you go into this in the film, but can you sort of talk about the genesis of Dick Johnson is Dead? When you first initially, how it sort of morphed into the film it became.
Right. Well, I mean, like I'm saying, it's like sort of teasing these multiple beginnings, but certainly one of them is the moment in which the editor of Camera Person, Nels Bangerter, took some footage that I had shot of my mother at the end of her life. I'd filmed very little with my mother. My mother went through a 7-year bout with Alzheimer's that was very painful for all of us. And I'd shot just a little bit of footage, and Nels cut a shot of me, sort of playing with her ashes. I have to say, Jenelle, I just realized, it's really funny. I actually just realized like my mom's ashes are sitting right here. I might as well just because like dad's here, I might as well bring her into the.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah. And with her are this wonderful little death carved from a cow bone from a Mexican prison. So I just happen to have that on the shelf behind me. I just realized as I said that about my mom. But anyhow,
that's cool.
So Nels cut from a shot of these ashes and me moving the box with my hand to a shot of my mom alive. And the first time I watched it, it just went like it shot through me like electricity. I thought my mom had come back to life, like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. And I was like, whoa, movies can do this. Like even for a second that I believed, even for a second my mom was alive was so thrilling. It was like having a super vivid dream. And so that was one of the origin stories for sure. And then the other origin story is a dream I had where a man who I did not recognize sat up in an open casket and said, I'm Dick Johnson and I'm not dead yet. And that prompted me to imagine bringing all of his friends together in the church that he and my mom had worshiped in for 50 years and to do a funeral for my father in advance of his death. And, it's like pretty simple for me. It's like, I really wanted my mom to be there at the end of her funeral and she wasn't. So this was the chance to like do it and then have, be able to hug my dad at the end of it.
And as we see in the film, your dad is a very good sport about it. He plays along, but What did he say, or how did he react when you initially sort of told him the idea?
He laughed. Unequivocally, he laughed, right? You know, I mean, he introduced me to Charles Addams cartoons. He introduced me to Mel Brooks, to Monty Python. I introduced him to Jackass. He loved The Simpsons. So he loved to laugh. And I think one of the things that it's taken me a long time to figure out is, I think people who have to deal with a lot of pain, and, in my father's case, it's more pain by proxy, right? You're a psychiatrist and you're listening to people's pain. But I've certainly learned it from people around the world, and particularly people who've survived like horrific things, people who are survivors of genocides. Not all of them, but some of them are the funniest people in the world. And so sort of over time, I've been like, oh, it's not that Dad's trying to escape pain by laughing, but it is how he holds it all, holds the madness of this world in balance in some ways. So he, as a person, was the inspiration in many ways to play with death, defy death, try to make a funny film, which I'd never tried to do before. And it's hard to make a funny film, as you know. Like, you're good at doing funny. I'm like new to the game.
Well, what about the other people in his life? Like the funeral that you do stage for him is so beautiful, but did anyone resist attending or being involved?
I would say my brother resisted the most strongly, and sent me this beautiful email, sort of like, I'd be comfortable with this, but not comfortable with that. And, I think it was too painful as an idea right away. And when I first had conceptualized it, I was like, oh, Dad's going to be up front in an open casket, right? And Kirk was just like, are you kidding me? Like, over my dead body, you're putting our dad, in front of, and so that conversation, part of this process for me is like, it's an experimental process. It's a process of having conversations about death with the people we love. And so it's like, I couldn't deny my brother his rights to have this conversation. And in fact, his resistance ended up allowing me to be more lucid about what my father was capable of. And I think what we actually ended up doing, because of my brother's, sort of line that he drew, then that allowed us to imagine, oh, we could film the open casket shoot the day before, green screen it in later, so that the people in the church would really have the experience of his absence during the funeral. So it was fantastic, because my brother actually, inadvertently, he'll say now that he was the genius, but he was the one who forced me to come up with the idea that allowed it to be more emotionally impactful. And, I think that is often the way with making things and with life. Like, the constraints are the things that push us into the territory we're not quite ready to go into.
What's the expression? Necessity is the mother of all invention.
Yeah. And I don't know what the father of death is, but
that's right. There's more to it. I forgot. I actually wanted to ask about that, because I was curious who was in the coffin at that funeral. It really was him?
Oh, no. So he was in the coffin, but the coffin was not on the stage at the moment of the funeral. We green screened it in after, which is like one of these things that the editor, Nels Bangerter, was really interested in. Like, how can we convey that to the audience at the end of the funeral? And so the coffin sort of blinks and fades away, like in the way that like death happens, like either the light switch goes out or you fade away, right? But honestly, you come up with these crazy ideas, but then when you are confronted with the moment of like asking your 87-year-old father to like clamber into a casket, to see it changes you. And certainly, his best friend who was there was just like, whoa, this is hard. This is too much, right?
Was he the one who delivers the eulogy?
Yes, and blows the horn and sobs. Yeah. And this is the thing, I did not make this film alone. I made it with my father, in collaboration with my father. I made it with his friends. I made it with this extraordinary team of really experienced filmmakers, who sort of know that documentary has this capacity to reveal the unexpected. and then who also are really interested in how can we push the form? Like, how can we try to make a movie that will make my father live forever?
Mm. I'm so curious because you kill your father multiple times in this film, and I feel like it's always done with love and sensitivity and humor. But did you ever have discussions like, are we crossing the line here? Was there certain deaths you imagined that you decided not to do because you were just going too far?
Yes, yes, and yes. Like, I mean, um, there's a scene in Camera Person where I'm filming toddlers playing with an axe in Bosnia. And in the scene, you can hear me like breathing and swearing to myself, like behind the camera of like, and it sort of, it's going back and forth of like, I should be filming this. No, I should be running and stopping these kids. No, they're okay. No, they're not okay. And this is the way I define ethics in filmmaking work. Like, it's not, oh, I decide to be a decent person and then the decision is made and I'm done. Filmmaking requires this incredibly nimble questioning of yourself at sort of all moments. And I knew when I began making this film that my dad was old, but I had not consciously acknowledged to myself that he was starting to show signs of dementia. And it wasn't until we had the financing for the film that I, had to say like, oh, he has dementia. Like, you have to stop playing around here, KJ, like it's happening. And then I was like, maybe I should give all the money back to Netflix and not make this movie. Like, my dad has dementia. And then the question started coming like, okay, so why would I sideline him in this moment? Can I keep him close? Can I find a way to own my responsibility to him in this changing state? Can, like, in this irreverence and indignity, can we hang on to the dignity of our relationship? And can we be mischievous together, through it? So that became the question, but we were asking it at literally every moment of this shoot. I don't know, Jenelle, do you have any experience with dementia?
Yeah, a lot on my dad's side of the family, unfortunately.
Right. So you know how weird dementia is. I mean, I think it's very hard to explain to those who are lucky enough not to have been intimate with dementia, but dementia is freaky. So that sometimes, the person is really there and then they're totally gone and, it sort of moves around. So many times I would, ask my father the same questions over and over to confirm, like, do we have a 80 times out of 100? Is he down for doing this? Or, that kind of thing. And then, of course, we showed that my father's watched the film hundreds of times and he's like the freshest viewer. He's like the editor who's just like seen the footage for the first time and he'd be like, this scene isn't funny. And so a lot of times his take on the scene made us return and shift it. So he was an active participant in the filming and the editing.
Not to plug another movie, but because it's an independent film, I'll just mention, I don't know if you've seen either the play or the movie The Father. Yeah, you have. Yeah. So it's, for those who haven't seen it, check it out when it comes out, but it sort of tells the story of dementia from the point of view of the person suffering it. And, blessedly, I don't know what that's like from that point of view, but I feel like it really must capture the disorientation.
It really makes you wonder. I mean, I'm definitely curious about what the state might be. And I love that, Anthony Hopkins like embodied that so powerfully. But, Janelle, I often like think about why, in some ways, our cinema industry values fiction films over documentary films. And, both economically and sort of in what people like, ooh, I want to see this I want to see this film. I don't want to see that film. And I think in some ways, like, we are emotionally protected by the fact that films that work with actors, we can like go through that incredible emotional experience with Anthony Hopkins and then say, phew, Anthony Hopkins is all right. Right? But, with Dick Johnson is Dead, you can't say like, Dad's in a dementia care facility. Like, he's not all right. Like, he's dead already. But he's also here, of course. Right. And I think that's the thing that sort of fascinates me about our human needs. Like, our denial about death or our wish to not encounter pain, like either we've experienced it already and we really don't want any more of it, or, I think it's the confronting of our own impotencies or failings, or, like what's so hard. And so that I think, often documentary just like puts it in our face, right? Like this social reality is here, this, racial injustice is here, and what are you doing about it, right? The documentary like puts you on the spot in a certain way.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, obviously you created this movie, so you knew what you were getting into, but did you find did you find while making it, or perhaps even in editing, was it difficult for you? Was it emotional, to have to watch this?
This film, we conceived it in this very radical way, so that we knew we were going to sort of make and unmake, make and remake, so that we were sort of constantly searching after a moment that we knew was a high stakes moment, like my father's about to retire and pack up his office. We're packing up our family home in Seattle. As a documentary cinematographer, I know if I walk into a situation like that with a person, something unexpected and powerful will happen. So we were counting on the sort of unexpected emotions of filming observational documentary. And then we were relying on our imaginations to imagine the future when he might die. And so that, we're in my house with my dad, and I'm like, lie down at the bottom of the stairs as if you've fallen down the stairs. And then we can sort of build that into a scene that goes from the present moment of documentary into the imagined moment of fiction. And so that kind of back and forth process, I would say, was something that it just got me thinking about the nature of time, the nature of self. And, I started to realize that movies are not like, they're not contained by this space, right? Like they're like, I can sort of reach through there to you, and I can ask you, Jenelle, like, I asked you at the beginning of this conversation, how would you wish to die, right? And then you asked it to the audience. But that's the thing that I think that we were trying to do with this process, is sort of break open this frame and like, like, is my dad here? Is he not here? Is an image here? Is it not here? So like, can I go through here and like touch you and ask you that question?
Are you asking me the question? Or? Well, it's funny. My answer has changed from the start. When we were talking earlier, I've always thought that I was a go in my sleep person. And then we started talking before we came on here about how my father passed away, which was under the Death with Dignity Act. And I think I might want to go like him if possible, which is surrounded by people I love, knowing what the end point is, but also painlessly. Now, unfortunately, to do that, it would mean I'd have to have a terminal disease. So if I could do it without that, it'd be great. In which case, I'll go with dying in my sleep.
One, can we just acknowledge your father? Will you please tell me your father's name?
It's Richard Riley.
Richard Riley.
Yeah, very Irish.
Was Richard a funny guy?
He was hilarious.
Really?
Yeah.
What was his shtick?
Playing the accordion and sometimes dressing up like a chicken.
What?
Yeah. I think he might have had some thwarted actor ambitions.
Clearly. So do you sort of embody his wildest dreams?
You know what? I don't like to think so. And for the longest time, I resented anyone who said we were alike. But yeah, definitely.
Well, that's so cool, right? He's sort of living on in you in all of these ways, right?
And I see it more and more now. Like I never used to see the physical resemblance because he's very white and the other half of the family is Japanese, which I tend to take after physically. But now, like more and more, I see my dad.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Richard in a chicken suit. With dignity.
It doesn't sound dignified, but it is.
I think that's so interesting. Like, I asked you, like, in terms of like permission and things that okay, not okay. Like, I asked you before this call when we weren't live whether that would be okay if I ask you that. Often when I'm doing an interview with a journalist, or when I'm behind the scenes with the PR people behind these things, I just ask people. And I've been noticing in myself that when I ask it and I hear other people's responses, I keep changing I'm like, oh, that's a good one, right? Like, oh, I like that one. But I do think that you're so original that in a certain way, you're like, I can't do dying in my sleep. That's too like, you're like, I want something. But I think the idea of painless, like that we wish things to be painless. And, what I think I'm getting at in this movie in many ways is like loving people, like the necessity, the pain is a part of loving people because mortality is a part of our humanness, right? So that even if it was painless for you, I think there'd be a lot of people in pain around you. There will be a lot of people in pain around you the moment that you die, as there were for your father, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of, we're getting some great responses. Someone says they want to die at Disneyland.
Oh, on which ride?
Someone wants to die, Matt wants to die by hang gliding into the mouth of an active volcano.
I still want to go in a volcano. Oh my God. I went to an active volcano in Vanuatu, and it was everything I could do not to throw myself in, because like it's just like molten orange. You could just like eat it. It's so amazing. I'm with you, Matt.
And then very specifically, someone wants to go by being sheared in half by falling satellite shrapnel.
Whoa. That's like a pretty, like that is, there's a very infinitesimal chance that might happen.
So specific. And actually Rebecca is asking, how do you want to go?
Yeah, well, I'm like you, Jenelle, in a certain way. Like, I think when I was first making this movie, I was an if I dyer. I was like, well, if I die. So I'm coming around to the I will die. And then I went straight to like, I really want an absurdist death. Like, I want a death that will make people laugh out loud. Like, like, oh, I got choked by my scarf while I was driving my car. Like that kind of death is so spectacular. But now, I was on a call with some young people at the New School the other day, and this 15-year-old just killed me by talking about his friend's mother who had just died of a brain aneurysm, and how like all he wished was to live long and then like be surrounded by the family that he had created. And it wasn't even like his biological family. It was just like he wanted to be surrounded by people who loved him. And I was just like, you go, 15-year-old, like, forget me and my, like, I don't want to do a funny death. It's like, wow. Like, I was just like, oh, you are all heart. So I think that's what I love about this process of this film. It's like, it's a back and forth. It's a back and forth between people, and like that you remind me that, people in the state of Oregon can choose to die if they have a terminal disease. And what a remarkably just powerful and complex choice that would be to make, that not everyone can make.
And I wish everyone could. It's unfortunate. Actually, the person who wanted to be sheared in half by falling satellite shrapnel, who is an anonymous attendee, wanted to know if you would ever want to direct a fiction feature, and if so, what genre?
Ooh, so here's my thing. I am so into the like existential madness of filmmaking that I don't believe in genre anymore. I don't believe in fiction anymore. Like, I think I want to make films that are unfamiliar to me, that are unrecognizable, that none of us have ever seen before. And I think in a way, like, honestly, if each of us who aspires to make a film, like if we could like storm the barricades of this film industry and we each were given like access to like money, craft, crew, and we could all develop our own voices, I feel like genre would be gone. Like we just have an explosion of all these different forms, right? So I'm definitely making more work that I imagine, and I'm going to continue to make work that is grounded in the evidence that I see around me. How about that?
Great. Sort of tied to that, Carrie had a question. She wanted to let you know this is a wonderful film. I'm so curious about the funeral scene. The reactions were so real and loving. Were they actually friends, or did you use any actors? And she just wanted to make sure that they knew that Dick was still alive.
Yes, yes, yes. So, you know, I say some of those things in the voiceover, but I'm hoping you were like crying so hard while it was happening that you didn't totally hear it. but, you know, those were all of his friends. I had extensive conversations, written a letter to all of them about why I was making this film, why I wanted to do a funeral. At that point, they were all aware that he did have the beginnings of dementia. They had all attended my mother's funeral in that same space, and they were already grieving him. You know, dementia, I think, creates this context for anticipatory grief. You know that you will lose the physical body of the person, right? But that they will stay forever in your heart. Like your Richard is like playing the accordion right now in your heart, Jenelle, you know? And so I think what's profound for me is that, you know, most of the people that were there in that church consider that their sacred space. They are believing Seventh-day Adventists, and they let us come in with movie cameras and use it as a performance space. But, you know, I reached out to the pastor and I said, can we do this? And he said, I owe this to Dick. And he was like, this will be a celebration of his life. And so I think like this idea of relationships and what we build in relationships comes, for me, you know, for many people, but from my father, as a psychiatrist, he would often say, like, I don't know if I have the capacity to help people really, you know, like, can we address schizophrenia, or can we, you know, bipolar, like so many challenges of mental illness. Like, yes, there's medication, but, you know, how does it affect it? You know, what's my capacity to help this person? But he said, I do believe on a certain level, if anything might heal, it would be the relationship that would heal. You know, sort of being in the relationship with the person over time. And when I went to the pastor and the people in the church to ask them if they would participate in this, they all cited their relationship with my father and the fact that he would, you know, they knew that he would love to sort of both go for it emotionally and laugh about it. So yeah, everybody was in on the joke. Everyone knew that he was still alive. Everyone knew that he had dementia. What they didn't know was that he was up in the balcony listening on headphones and watching on a monitor, right? And what they didn't know was that he would come down at the end of the funeral, and, you know, that's where they break into their spontaneous applause.
Stephen would like to take a Timothy Leary vacation, an LSD trip that I stay on. And he wants to know, how did you come up with the Broadway musical dance number of A Vision of Heaven? I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thanks. And I hope that Timothy Leary and you can like travel together someday. You know, this film, the idea of this film was always that it would teach us how to make it, and that my father's dementia would teach us how to interact with him. And so, you know, at a certain point, we'd killed him enough. And my wonderful production team of Big Mouth Productions, Katie Chevigny, Marilyn Ness, Maureen Ryan, they kept saying, like, haven't we killed him enough? And they're like, can't we like create a world that's pleasurable for him? And all of a sudden I was like, heaven, let's go to heaven. And so, you know, my dad's dementia was such that he would be in a moment, but then 2 minutes later, loop it and repeat it, right? And so that gave us the inspiration to say, let's film in slow motion. Let's expand the present moment so that his smile that's just like that can last for 3 minutes. And so then once we had that idea of slow motion, we're like, woo, what can fly through the air, right? Like, you know, it just, one idea beget another idea. And because my mother's already dead, I wanted her in heaven, but I didn't want an actress to play her. And then I was just like, well, the only solution is a mask for her. And then that gave me the idea of other people who could be there, and other dead people who I honor and treasure because they, with their life, like they experience extreme pain in their lives, and they use their body and their artistic like vision to transform their pain into something meaningful for the rest of us. So I was like, you know, Frederick Douglass, Billie Holiday, Bruce Lee, you know, they have a place in heaven. Farrah Fawcett has a place in heaven.
Absolutely. In my mind too. Rodrigo would probably like to die via asphyxiation, which for me is like one of the worst things I can imagine.
Whoa. Rodrigo, like self-imposed or someone does it to you?
Doesn't specify.
Wow, Rodrigo. Okay, that's intense. That's literally the first time I've ever heard that. And I'm like fascinated. Please type more.
But he would like to know, were other hybrid documentaries like My Winnipeg an influence on your movie? And along the same lines, Matt, the person who wants to die by hang gliding into the volcano, wanted to know if there were other films that mixed documentary and narrative that you use techniques or inspiration from.
So I've long been a fan of Kurostami and Eduardo Coutinho, Brazilian filmmaker. But, you know, obviously we're like experiencing this like crazy explosion of sort of the art of nonfiction, right? Where people are really working with genre in all these kinds of ways. And I was in a fellowship with Kitty Green, and
oh
yeah, she's the best. And she sort of broke down the way that she thinks of, it's like she's interested in a budget, like that a budget is like windows into who she will be working with, which I just found so beautiful because I'm like total people person. I'm like, numbers, like, and then it's like, oh, the numbers are the people. The numbers are the people you pay, and it's their time. And so sort of the idea of a budget being the constraints that like pushes your imagination, but that also a budget represents your respect for people, their capacities, and their time, was like, so that was just like blew my mind. And I was like, that is one thing I'm trying to do with this film. I'm trying to be in relationships with the people I make the film with. So for the heaven scenes in particular, we did this really experimental work where I asked sort of each of the different collaborators, the cinematographer, the choreographer, the costume designer, the actors, the backup singers, like, let's talk about your relationship to death. Let's talk about who your parents were. Let's talk about what you think is funny. And little by little, we started to sort of build this web. And the other thing that, because my dad was at the center of it and we didn't know how he was going to behave at any moment, we sort of had to be ready to do anything. So everyone was sort of standing by with their pieces of the collage. And the idea is like, we activate the collage and then dad enters the collage, but it's happening in slow motion. So time like stretches out. And I have never on a fiction set felt so much like I feel when I'm shooting a documentary. It was like, oh, we have to be surprised by things, improvise, and the wonderful focus puller was dying because it's really hard to pull focus in slow motion. And my dad didn't hit any marks. And by the end, we were just like giving standing ovations to the focus puller, because he was doing the impossible, right? So it was like a really joyous set, actually. Yeah. We really had fun on the heaven set.
I mean, it's a really joyous movie. And when I try to describe it to people, I'm like, you're going to think I'm crazy, but like, and the fact that you shared this joyous man with us, like, I'm so grateful. Stephen was actually wondering, he was talking about, the joy Dick has in eating chocolate cake, and he's hoping he's still able to consume chocolate cake.
Yes, I bought him like a pound of chocolate milk balls. He got 5 cakes for his birthday. It's so funny because everyone's been like commenting on like his technique with like spooning out ice cream, like how he's like really good technique. It's love of the game. It's total love of the game.
We have an anonymous person who wants to die on Space Mountain, which I actually have a friend who almost did that.
Yeah, maybe, or another person. Wow.
And Jay-Z Lieberman, I really love this film. What was the hardest part about making it?
Okay, I'll tell you the hardest part. In probably September, so we finished we were finishing the movie. I had not yet imagined that I needed to do voiceover in the movie. So none of that voiceover was written. We'd filmed all the heaven things, and we sort of like already built the whole film. And then I was like, we got to drop a bowling ball on it and like get the heaven stuff in. And my father started waking up a lot in the middle of the night. So, my father was living in this 1-bedroom apartment with me and the kids, and he started waking up in the night all the time. And, one particular time he came out fully dressed in a suit, and he was like, I've got to, there's a patient waiting for me. And I was like, Dad, it's 3:00 in the morning. There's no patient here. And he's like, no, they're downstairs. And I said, Dad, what kind of patient would come at 3 a.m? And he said, someone who really needs me. And I was like, okay, guess I'm getting dressed and we're going downstairs, right? So we go downstairs, and he steps out of the elevator in the building and looks at the empty lobby, and he says, there's no one here, is there? I said, no. And he said, wow, it must be so hard to watch me lose my mind. And I'm like, ugh, like already I've been like woken at 3 a.m, like had to get dressed to go downstairs with him. Like now it's like a knife in the heart, like, and then he said, you got to call those guys to come with the little like white suits to take me away. And then he like turns to me and like with the most mischievous little, he's like, but you're really going to miss me. And so during this time, I started having like major heart palpitations. Like I could like feel my heart beating in my throat, in my arm. Like I felt like I was like dying of heartbreak, because it was really clear to me, like, I'm not going to be able to keep taking care of him. Like I can't, like, I'm not sleeping through the night. He's not sleeping through the night. He's, he was going out the door. I couldn't lock him into his room, and just this realization of like, this is about to end was like, it really felt like ripping my heart out of my body, like on multiple times a day. I'm like, I don't know, just chewing on my heart right now. It hurts so bad. So that was the hardest part. And it was also, that moment of creative angst where you're just like, oh, this movie, we haven't done it. This movie sucks. And my feeling was, I haven't captured his essence. Like he's already gone. We failed. We don't have him in the movie. And so it was like a place of deep sadness that I wrote that VO. And my 8-year-old son, Felix, loves the movie. He's like, except for your voice, he's just like, oh, you're so sad. Like, whoa, I hate listening to you talk like that. So that was the hard part.
Yeah. There's a really good technical question. And then I don't usually just read non-questions, but I might this well. Let's start with the technical question.
Okay.
How did you approach the editing process to this film, and how is it different from your previous documentaries, since this one had a lot of reenactments?
Yes. Wonderful question. So what we learned from Camera Person, one of the most profound things we learned was working with the wonderful sound mixer, Pete Horner, at the very end of the process of Camera Person. And he, where we had like, we thought we had failed with scenes, and then he transformed them with sound, was so remarkable that I was like, we're doing it differently this time. We're going to do sound mixing. We're going to do consultations about sound mixing at the very beginning of the film before we've even shot anything. We're going to come and sound mix in the middle, and then we're going to undo that work and sound mix again. And Skywalker was like, no one's ever done this before. And I was like, can we do this? And they're like, sure, you can do it. It's going to cost more money. And I was like, okay, like, let's do it. Because, we'd gotten this wonderful budget that I was so excited to have for the first time in my life. I've had a budget like before I started the movie, but then this one was like, I can't go to Hong Kong. He wasn't able to do all the big things that I first imagined with our big budget. And so I was like, let's spend some of that money experimenting with what sound can do for us, experimenting with tone, and maybe some of these things that we learn about, like what happens when the head falls on the ground and it sounds funny, or it sounds like sick making, or it's like Roadrunner. These like the sound gave us new ideas, and then we went back into the edit room. But it was always conceived as a process where we would cut things, learn things about the unexpected, and then change them, and then sort of keep going back and forth. So we edited for a really long time, and we sound mixed multiple times. And we waited till the very, very, very end to do the effects that we did. because it's so expensive, and to like really be like, yeah, we really need it here. So it was a wonderful process, and my entire team was just extraordinary in their willingness to make and break things.
We have, they aren't really questions, but we just have a lot of comments.
More death wishes.
Someone who just wants you to know your film was a gift, and hearing Dick's laughter, which is yours as well, was really wonderful. And I was just thinking, I know, like I said, all films are personal, but I have to imagine there's so many people who want to talk to you and share their stories. Does your dad realize how many people he's touched?
You know, not right now. You know, I talked to him 2 days ago, and I was like, Dad, like, you're in the New Yorker, you're like, you know, like all these like things that he treasured and would have loved. And he's like, you know, that's great, but all I really care about is being able to talk to you. And I was just like, oh, dude, like, you're so good. Like, you know, it's like, and he did say it was my birthday the other day, and thank you. It was on Monday, October 12th. And, you know, I have been feeling a little like, oh, you know, he doesn't get it. He doesn't know that this film is so loved by so many people. But he said, you know, seeing you glittering and sparkling on the world stage for your birthday has been one of the greatest thrills of my life. So I was like, oh, he does get it. He does get it. Yeah, but he's having a good time. Like I'm reading every review to him, and you know, at Sundance was remarkable. I mean, the fact of getting to be in person together. There was like a moment after one of the screenings, I like lost track of him for a minute. I was like kind of freaking out. I'm like, where's Dad? You know, like, where's Dad? And I came out, and there was like a line of women waiting to hug him. And he turned to me and he's like, I don't know how this happened, but it's working for me. So.
That's so wonderful. I'm pretty sure that most people in this Q&A have seen the movie, but if anyone hasn't, you can watch it for free on Netflix, or practically.
Well.
Everyone has Netflix, let's admit it. I want to thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for such wonderful questions. And everyone, please have a great weekend.
Yeah, and please, like, I hope you die the way you wish, and that it's a long, long time from now.
Amen.